Welcome back to the Small Business Show. I'm your host, Lori Brooks. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. I am super excited to welcome today's guest, Owen McGab Enaohwo, CEO and founder of Sweet Process, an easy-to-use software that enables company executives and their employees to collaborate together to quickly document and/or improve their standard operating procedures, processes, and policies. Owen, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Laurie, thanks for having me on your show.
Certainly. I am super excited to dive into your journey as an entrepreneur and to dive into your software. I am just so excited about what you've created. It's ridiculous. But before we get there, I want to rewind the clock just a bit. I want to go back to elementary or junior high school. Think about a time when an aunt or an uncle would have asked you, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Owen, what was your answer to that question back then?
Well, for me, I think I've always, I grew up in a household where, mom and dad my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom, although she wasn't an educator, but she also had, business and side hustles on the side. Because like, I remember, she had a business where she would sew like uniforms for like the
Mm,
different primary schools. So I'm just back so I'm from Nigeria. So we talk about schools, they call it primary schools, secondary schools, and so
mhm,
on and so forth. So she would sew uniforms for them. So that's what she used to do. So
mhm.
I always grew up in a entrepreneurial background. So in the back of my mind, I always knew that I would be an entrepreneur. I even remember back in the days I would get like uh, videos and all that stuff, and basically, maybe you could say a little bit bootleg, whatever, but renting out to people. Yeah, renting out to people so they watch the videos and stuff. So it's always been something that
Yeah.
I always knew I would be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Kudos to mom and dad for exposing you so early in life, immediately just making sure you understood you can do this for you. That is something that is so not often instilled. You've no idea how many people I've interviewed. And I myself grew up with parents who had jobs, who worked, and we were taught to, go to school, get a job. And that was what we thought life was supposed to be. So kudos to your parents for making sure that you understood what entrepreneurship was early on. What do
And I
you
totally
feel like?
understand that
Mhm.
because, like, even my wife, she grew up in a family where most of them are professors and educators and stuff like
Yes,
that. So she's
right.
always this career mindset, And so when we got married, I
Yep.
was like, trying to get her into my track of business and all that. But, one of my mentors in business told me, hey, you better let her, be in her track. 'Cause as a matter of fact, the fact that she's not interested in business, you now have
Mhm.
somebody who you can put some of your ideas on them to try to gauge them on how they think about it. Because as an entrepreneur,
Yep.
you're always about go, go, go. You don't even care about the risk. You just want to get it done. And if you have somebody that's more centered and thinks about a lot of things before they take action, at least you can have that person you can count on to get the
Yes.
non-entrepreneurial side of thinking about the thing you're about to get into. But I understand how having that background of entrepreneurs when I grew up influenced me versus how her background was more of the career and all that. It
Mhm.
can influence somebody. Yeah.
Right. Right. No, that's funny. My husband is a traditional employee. I'm the entrepreneur in the house, but both of our parents, from both households, we were raised in that same way of so and it's funny how as an entrepreneur, you kind of want your spouse to get into the business, to join, you hear those stories about other power couples who did this, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's funny. It is so refreshing to have that balance. So I agree, to have that balance of someone who's not inundated in the business. We're not going at all times. And he does make sure that I take a step back and take a breather every now and then, which I think, sometimes if you're both is so involved in the business can get lost in and of itself. So I totally understand. Totally understand. So, but what do you feel were some of the first steps for you? You already knew that entrepreneurship was in your future. You knew that was where you were headed. What do you feel were some of the first steps you took to really establish yourself as an entrepreneur coming into adulthood?
Well, so I think one of the things, because if you take the backstory, I lived in Nigeria, came here for college, and then now you're getting as an international student, getting into a whole new system. You have to learn how things
Mm,
are, and then go into the whole career route, and then eventually realizing, hey, this career thing, is really not for me. So one of the things that I did to try to understand, maybe how to play the game here on the business side of things was basically find, some kind of mentorship programs and stuff where I could
mm,
actually go and see people who are doing what I'm trying to get into. And yeah, obviously you have to pay a fee to whatever to join, but at least it's either that or going to YouTube and podcasts and trying
mhm.
to learn for free, but you don't get the whole knowledge organized, because what happens
Right.
is now you're going to have to find different pieces of information and try to piece them
Mhm.
all together versus paying for a specific mentorship program, and you go in there and you learn specifically things that have been organized for you in this very thing you're trying to get into. So that's what I did, and so it got into some different real estate, and eventually got from real estate into outsourcing, and
Mhm.
basically providing a company where I would provide people with back office staff from the Philippines, right? And then that
Yeah.
eventually brought me to software, which, if you want, I can tell how even Sweet Process, the software actually got started. Yeah.
Please. I'd love that.
Okay. So now if I skip forward to the journey, and this was in 2013. So this was when Sweet Process got started. But how we got started was I used to run an agency, and this was I had a group of people in the Philippines that was working on behalf of my clients. And back then, this
Mhm.
was when books like The 4 Hour Work Week and The World is
Yes.
Flat, and things were popular, where it was opening up small business owners the idea that, hey, you don't literally have to be like these big companies where
Mhm.
the Fortune 500, where they will go to another company, another country, and outsource, a whole large department. And so it made them understand that even the small guys could do this. But then
Mhm.
they were coming to us with preconceived notion that they would just literally hire somebody from a different country with a different culture, and the person was just from day one, like magically, be able to do their work and do it at the
Yes.
scale and level that they would do it. So one of the things we had to do was
Um,
train them on the idea that, hey, in order for the person to do the work the way you want them to do it, you literally have to have procedures,
mhm.
some procedures in place that basically show people how the work is done. But
Mhm.
as you know, documenting procedures is not the most sexy thing to talk about, but like, it's one of the most critical things to do if you need to be able to
Yes.
scale the business. So we now had to come up with a situation back then where we would actually bring the clients on, and part of the onboarding process was having to say, hey, let's walk through a framework where we can identify where are the biggest bottlenecks of the tasks that are taking you most of your time, and then we
Yeah.
work with you to train on how the task is done. And that back then,
Yeah.
this was even before Zoom. So it was when Skype was the popular thing for meetings. So we'll meet
Yeah.
them online, and they will identify a specific task, and then we'll go through, training on how that task is done. And behind the scenes, someone is actually training, recording that interview session that they're having with
Mhm.
my onboarding staff, and then that will be taken to now turned into a document of step by step on how to do that work. But the issues
Right.
we run into back then was that back then there were not tools built specifically for this problem of documenting
Mhm.
how procedures are done, especially at the small business scale, because there were tools like on the larger scale for like enterprise and all that, and some very specialized tools that like some of these business consultants or people that are very much
Mhm.
into that they do, but those tools were hard to use, right?
Right.
So we now say, okay, first of all, I'm not going to get my customers to use some of these tools, because even us, it was difficult for us to use. Imagine the customers trying to use it, and they already have
Yes.
bugs with the work they got to do. So we now started saying, okay, let's find some other tools out there that were not necessarily meant for this purpose of, having a single place online where your knowledge of how your work is done is going to be into a single place where, and they were not built for documenting procedures and stuff like this. So we started hacking up together a bunch of different free tools. And in my mind, I was like, you know what? There has to be a better way to do this. And so fast
Mm.
forward, I went on a podcast, similar to like this one, where I went on Mixergy, hosted by Andrew Warner, and he brought me
Mhm.
on to talk about how entrepreneurs can streamline their operations and document how they do their work. And I did that. And one of the things that happened after the interview, when it was published, my co-founder all the way from Australia, he's the current CTO and co-founder of Sweet Process, reached out to me after watching the interview, say, hey, I loved everything you were talking about in that course. And I had this idea of building an app, and I wanted to, brainstorm with you on what you think, right? And after having a conversation with him, realized this dude was trying to build an app that literally is in line with the issue I'm even having while I'm running this agency. I was like, dude, instead of just giving you suggestions on what to do, are you open to us building this together? Because this was literally at the very beginning, nothing, was started at this point. And one of the things I want us to do is, if you agree to this, is that I want us to, instead of building the software out, I want us to spend some time having conversations with potential customers, because last thing we want is a situation where the app ends up being as hard to use as the other apps we're having issues with right now. So we spent, a couple of months, like maybe a month or so, just having conversations with, potential customers, recording information, on and so forth. And so we can understand the real issue that is behind this, what's preventing people from collaborating together to document how work is done. How can we make it easier? Where are the best places to get this insights from them and stuff like that. So we had these interviews, and then we synthesized all the different recordings of what we had, and we were able to determine, okay, what our app needs to have as a minimum for us to make it sure that it solves the problem, but not only that, it's easier to use. And then we got rid of all the other bloats and all the other stuff that all the other apps probably have, because we felt like, we want to make it simple, because the goal is for small to medium-sized companies and their employees so they can use this. So fast forward now, Sweet Process, we have over 2,000 companies using the software. And the typical company runs the site from 20 employees all the way to like the larger employees with 1,000 or more employees. I mean, we have banks using our company software. We have government agencies using our software. We have, surprisingly, churches and volunteers using our software. Because at the end of the day, the problem of having that single place where employees can go to find the knowledge of how task is done, it runs the gamut. It's not industry specific, because you need that, especially for work that people have to do that cannot be automated. How do you make sure that they do it predictably? You need a solution that solves this problem. And so that's how Sweet Process was formed. And if you want, I can share kind of the framework that maybe can help the listener today, regardless of whether they use our software or not, on how they can actually document procedures and make it easier for them.
That would be awesome. I would love to hear that. Oh, and I am so excited about your software. I can't even tell you, I can't wait to dive into it and to start recommending it to clients, because it's like a dream come true, to be honest. I don't know how much of my audience honestly knows this next bit of what I'm about to mention to you, but when I started my consulting practice, Owen, I was making operation and procedure manuals from scratch.
Oh, yeah.
From scratch, right? Your software is a dream come true, and it's something I'm so excited to see is available and on the market, and so excited to help you share all about it. Please share the framework with us. I'd love to hear.
First of all, I want to make it so that people understand that running your business, maybe eventually you have the mindset that you want to sell it or whatever. But let's put it in this context. If you're trying to sell a business and you're coming to somebody who potentially is the buyer, it's two of the same business, you and someone else. The person that you're coming to sell the business to realizes you don't have any kind of systems in place for how the work is done, and for the most part, it depends on you. But so this other person that everything is documented, every role is documented, every task that happens in their business, there are documents in there. At any time, if someone leaves, they can be replaced because onboarding goes very smoothly and fast because all the documentation is there. Which of the companies do you think will have more value, right? So that's the idea, that if you eventually want to sell the business, from the potential buyer, the need to do this. But let's say you don't even want to sell the business, but in order to grow and scale the business, you need to have these things in place. So now that we've covered that whole thing, let me now give you a framework. So the first, you've bought into the idea that you want to start documenting procedures. And the next question is, where do you start, right? First things first is, I tell people, don't worry about documenting everything. Let's have a assessment of what we are doing currently right now, because we want
Yes.
to get rid of the things we don't need to do. Because the thing is, we have this whole thing of tribal knowledge of how we've always done things. And if you get excited about documentation, then next thing you think you want to document everything. No, let's look at the work you do on a recurring basis and determine
Yes.
what needs to be documented versus what needs to be eliminated. Because if it needs to be eliminated, no need to document it whatsoever. Let's just get rid of it. Now you're left with the recurring tasks that you can't get rid of. Now let's look at those tasks and say, okay, let's break it down into two different parts. The first part are those, sales and marketing, the sexy stuff that gets all the customers in that people always keep talking about. But on the other side of that are those production tasks that actually help you deliver what you've, got the customer in the first place, right? So a lot of people might say, oh, let's get started, documenting the sales and marketing stuff, because we know, if we can document how that's done, I can replace myself there and get more people doing it. But yes, what's going to happen? You're going to have more people coming in to a business that has bottlenecks and chaos on the production side, which means more people to be pissed at your service, right? So why don't we focus on the production side of things first, right? So now that we're clear on what we're focusing on, I start looking at what is the biggest production related task that, anytime it happens, it's the biggest one that gives me a headache, or is the one that people keep asking the same questions over and over again, the one that, if I'm not here to address it, things basically come to a screeching halt. So you have to identify the biggest production task where there's a big bottleneck. The reason why is when you start with that and you start getting value from the fact that you document how that works, and you now start having people do that work, it frees you up to start looking at the next biggest bottleneck on the production side, and so on and so forth. And so we start working our way down. So now let's assume that you have identified that biggest bottleneck task on the production side. The next question is, when do you start to document? My answer to that is at the time you need to do the work, because that's the best. You go with your mind now is in the best framework to say, okay, the best mind says, okay, I'm about to start this task. I know I do it maybe every month. I have to do this very task. And now you have to do the task. And usually, because you don't have documentation in place, you spend some time trying to figure out, okay, what are the materials you need? How do I did it last time? So now I'm saying, when you're about to do this task first, today, that's when you start documenting. And you might be worried, thinking, oh, you have to document an encyclopedia. No, let's get rid of that. First of all, I want to give you the permission to install in your mind and the mind of your managers, the mind of all your employees on ground, that this is going to be a thing where we are all given the permission to, this is going to be a continuous improvement kind of thing, where we are starting from version 0, and we're going to keep building and improving it over time. The reason why I'm saying this is because you are giving the permission that when you're documenting the task, at the time you're doing it, you want to document what I call a minimum viable procedure, which is a fancy way of saying a skeleton, where it's just the title of the title of the task, so that anybody in your company sees that title, they know exactly what they can do when they read that document. So it's how to do whatever you're doing right now, right? That's the title. And then what you need is just the title of each of the steps. So imagine this task is a 10-step task. By the time you're done with actually doing the work, you would also have a document, which I call a minimum viable procedure, that will have the title of the task and the title of the 10 step. But guess what? No details filled in just yet, just the outline, the minimum viable procedure. How do we go from that to more details filled in? So now, you might have already taught some of your managers or your employees verbally how this task is done. You're going to instruct them, anytime you're about to work on this task again, we need to have this outline document right there in front of you, so that as you're working on it, the goal is just to go in there and plug in some details, or maybe step 1, step 2, and we don't want that much information. We just want some minimum text in there, some screenshot in there, or some video. And the caveat with video is that if you're going to do video, don't make a movie, because we want the video to be like 1 minute or less for each step, so that if someone is looking at that very step, they can follow the instructions completely for that step, and it's concise to that step. So what happens is, as they are working on the task each time moving forward, they are improving the document. And then every time the document is improved, you should be aware of this, so that you can go back and look at the document where it is now and see, okay, it's making sense. And so the reason is, as they're doing this over time, that document is improving from version 1 or version 2, and it's adding more value into it. And the reason why I say you need to marry it up with when the work is actually being done is because a lot of the insights for improvements come when the work is being actually done. Because they might see something that you had 10 steps in, then and they start doing the work and realize, hey, we need to eliminate 3 steps out of this because we found a better way to do it. So a lot of the insights for improvement comes from when the work is being done. But I've just shown you how to go through that dance. And now after that, you find the next task on the production side to do that same dance with, and you start, before you know it, over time, you've done that for all the different production documents. And then you start looking at the sales and marketing side of things. You do the same things for them. And then you now have all those documents in place. And obviously, when you've documented all that on the sales and marketing side, you can start bringing more employees to follow your instructions that you already have in place, knowing that, on the production side of things, it's taken care of because you already have those documents in place as well. So now the next thing that someone might be saying is, I get this, but what if my employees don't have enough time to do this? Well, there's also another option where you can hire what is called a process consultant. They can come into your company, go through how you work, help you figure out what you need to eliminate. And maybe they might use a tool like Street Process to actually help you document how the work is done. But I always encourage people that you need to make sure that this is something your employees actually do. So, hey, you can always incentivize your employee and make sure that, hey, they're not only are they going to be paid for the extra time that they have actually help you to create these documents, because you can pay them, or you can bring on someone into your company whose their role specifically is to spearhead this project, right? Someone in operations, whatever. But make sure if your employees are doing this, that they are incentivized, paid to do it. Another thing that you can do to kind of encourage a culture that continuous improvement is anytime an employee comes and asks you, hey, how do I do this, right? And let's say, for instance, you bought into the idea of using Street Process and you're using Street Process. The first answer to that question is, have you checked Street Process for the answer? And now, over time, you are building this culture, this character in them that, hey, every time before I ask my manager or my boss for how to do something, I need to go into the single source of truth, which is Street Process, to see if we already have that document in there. And if they have it in there on how it's done, and then you go ahead and get the work done. And what happens too now is when they start doing that, they're building this habit. And then eventually it comes across a situation where they're asking a question where there's no document in place already for that. Now that triggers a task for the manager to know, hey, I need to build this document because this is a new question with not addressed. I need to build this document. And now you see a new document has been added into Street Process based on the fact that the manager, the employees couldn't get the answer for what they needed. Another thing too that happens in terms of encouraging this is, as the employees start, looking through the documents and inside of Street Process for what they need to do on their daily basis, they will see a lot of times when there's improvements to a step or when there's changes and any communication or conversation that's going back and forth inside of the document, they see it's always, it's tagged to this employee, tagged to that employee. So what does that do in the mind of, this other employee? Well, I see my colleague is always in there making improvements, and when he's making improvements, the manager is approving his improvement, the things he added, right? This is an active employee going there to help to change how we do work. That tells another employee that maybe I should start doing this too, because I can literally see every time there's a change, I see who is tagged to, who was credited to. Now your employees all get into this dance of actually doing it. And an additional thing to sell this whole idea of an employees being involved in this is that you're always talking about, the culture of a company, but think about it this way. If you can be part of a company where they encourage you to actually go there and proactively improve on how work is done, there's no better way of saying that the culture is the best culture, because they literally help telling you, come work for us. But whenever we do work, we want you to get the insight to improve the actual underlying documents that show how we do work here. I mean, there's no better way of saying, the best type of company to work for is the type that encourages you to improve how you work with them and improve the results that your work does for them. So I hope I've really tried to clarify in the minds of the listener, not only the framework of how to do it, but also giving them, some tips and strategy to really, get this moving forward in their company.
Definitely. It goes back to streamlining, templating, and batching those pieces out and really being able to hand that off to someone else as they're coming in. No, Owen, thank you for walking us through the way that you help your clients and how it is that your software is helping clients. I'm super excited to dive in. I can't wait, because it sounds like everything I do manually on a regular basis is like wrapped up into this tiny package, like of a dream come true. So it sounds like you heard about my show and then created a product for me and then came on my show to present it to me. I don't know. Anyhow, I'm just grateful right now.
Yes, yes, I'm glad to be. And it goes back to actually the interviews we did with potential customers before we even started, creating the software. One of the
Right.
key things we learned was not only do we need to make sure the software is easy to use, but we also have to marry the whole idea of collaborating to document how the work is done with the actual place where the work is actually being done. Because one thing you realize is these documents can get stale and old quickly if there's not that conscious effort of improving them. And where do you get the most insights for improvement is where the work is being done. So we had to marry the task management with the actual documentation. So in our app, not only can you document, collaborate together to document how the work is done, but you can also get tasks assigned to your employees and track how work is being done. Because one of the things in our app, you cannot even assign tasks to someone without it being based on an underlying procedure that shows them step by step how the work is done on an underlying process. So employees can never say, I don't know how the work is done, because it's literally showing you step one, do this. These are the details for step one. Step two, do that. And as you're going through the task, you are checking off the steps, and you're checking off the step, and the task is being tracked. And one of the things that happens on the task management side of the app is that if, for instance, an employee is going through a 10-step task, and for instance, they get to a specific step that, on the ground, it doesn't apply, they can pass that information back to the manager who is responsible for that document. And the manager can say, oh, that's true, we didn't account for this when we were building out this document. And then in real time, the manager can make the changes to the underlying document and then press a button, and after it's been approved, the task instance that the employee is working on is automatically upgraded with the new changes while they're on the ground to do the work, right? So these are kind of things that we had to learn on when we had these initial interviews with people, and we had to make sure that we built it into the software.
That sounds like you've done an absolutely lovely job, and I truly can't wait to just dive in and experience the program for myself, because it is very exciting. So I have to ask, if you had the ability to go back, say 10, 15 years, and tell yourself just one thing, what do you feel like it would be?
Don't change. Because yes, the reason why I say don't change is because all the mistakes and all the things that I've done and all the lessons I've learned is what makes me this version of me today. And if I go back and change something, I don't know what version I'll be. So I'll say my thing is don't change anything. Let's keep going where we are, but focus on today and then the things you want to do in the future, because the actions and the things you're taking today is what influences where you need to be tomorrow. Because for me, the failure is not necessarily failure. It's just I learned something. And that's a glass half full versus glass half empty way of thinking of things. Yes, failure is going to hurt. Well, if you look at failure as learning, yes, you learn and it hurts, but you're going to keep moving on and you're going to improve over time. So it's the same mindset of the continuous improvement. Yeah, but applied to personal life as well.
The audience already knows what I'm about to say to you. There's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. That's all there is. As long as you can grow, there's no such thing as failure. Oh, and you have been outstanding. And I truly appreciate you sharing your practice and your journey with us. The very last question of the show is so silly and almost irrelevant based off of your last answer, because like you said, don't change. There's nothing to change. You just have to learn from every single instance and move forward. And normally we wrap up the show by asking, if you had a magic wand and could change anything at all in your process or your practice today, what would it be and why? But to be honest,
for me,
you go for it.
I would say be better at learning. Be better at, you make a mistake, or you have to come back and unpack the experience, because if you don't take that conscious effort of sitting back and reflecting over what happens, you don't even get to see the things, the lesson that you're supposed to learn from it. So I think my answer for myself is not really change anything, but just get better at being able to reflect on the lessons, because you can be able to pick out gems that you didn't see because you just glazed over it. I want to get better at reviewing the actions I took and the outcomes. Not only that, I mean, if failure is painful to you, which it is, I'm not gonna lie, but you can always learn from people who have failed. That's why I like autobiographies, because that's the best way to learn. Whether it's the ones that they wrote themselves or the ones people write about people, especially entrepreneurs, whatever. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from the failures of others, so that you don't necessarily have to repeat it, but you can learn from how they do things. Granted, a lot of books are on autobiographies about things in the past. So if you want to learn things in the future, I tend to also look at podcasts, because podcasts, especially this episode of podcast where there's continuous episodes being brought out, they tend to have a lot of lessons that you can learn from the people you're trying to learn from, but things that are happening now. Right. So another hack that I have is, if you're trying to learn some specific topic or in some specific area, find an expert in it who is going out doing a lot of interviews, right? So the first thing you do is you go and look for all the different podcasts that have appeared on and start listening to different things they're saying, because they're going to be telling you stuff that's happening in real time that they're doing.
Yes.
And maybe some of the things you learn in each of the podcasts is a repeat of the other, but by the time you listen to 10 different episodes, you'll get some new insights that they didn't cover in the previous podcast. And if you don't have that time to do that whole hacking together the different story, if they have a course or something or some mentorship program, just go sign up for it and just get the package of everything all right there in front of you. So you can always pay for the education and use it. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, and I thank you so much for sharing your journey, for sharing Sweet Process with us, for sharing your time and energy this afternoon. Please share the best way for the audience to find you.
The best way to find me literally is just go. I connect with everybody on LinkedIn. As long as you have a picture of who you are, because I don't like this profile. I mean, on LinkedIn, this is a place where we're all talking about our accomplishments and business-wise, and there's no photo of your portrait. So, as long as you have a portrait of yourself, so I know I'm connecting with, just connect with me. Just Owen McGab now on LinkedIn, and I connect with literally almost everybody who connects back with me. But I also want to leave the listeners with a gift, because I know I shared you a framework on how to document procedures in your company and went through tips and all that. One of the things we have is, if you go on our website, by default, there's a 14-day trial that you can try the software, and if you like it, then buy it. But just because you're listening all the way to this point, I want to give you an extended trial. So you get a 28-day trial. And to get that, you go to sweetprocess.com/Laurie Brooks. So it's sweet like candy, like process.com/Laurie Brooks. And you get access to the extended trial.
Oh, and I thank you. You have been absolutely outstanding. I truly appreciate you sharing with the audience today. So thank you.
Thanks, Laurie, for having me.